Well, good morning, everybody. Danny back from Deep South Homestead on our porch time this morning. So Sunday morning, look, guys, nice and cool outside. The winds are blowing. I hope it don't mess up with the video too much. I'm actually sitting in a different location now. I'm still have the old porch time swing back now, and I want to take a moment today to remember those that were in the line of severe weather yesterday, which was Saturday, or let's just say Saturday, not yesterday, but it'd be Saturday, because y'all are going to see this on a Tuesday. Saturday, the weather was very, very bad down in the southern part of the United States down here. A lot of people lost their lives. Tornadoes were just ravaging things everywhere. Wanda and I, we spent much time in prayer about the places we have here, and God was really, really good to us. We got 1/4 of an inch of rain, just a light rain, wind didn't even blow. Now the wind was very rough during the day on Saturday. No rain, just wind, which we was able to work almost most of the day. And then when the rain come through and the line of storms came through, it lasted about maybe 15-20 minutes. Got 1/4 of an inch of rain. Almost no bad weather at any moment. A few pops of lightning in the distance, that was about it. But the people north of us really wreaked havoc on them. And our hearts and our prayers go out to those that had the tremendous damage done and lost lost homes, lives were lost, people's lives are shattered. I looked at a lot of the footage, and up, especially around Tylertown, Mississippi, on up through next to Melby, up by Bassfield, on up through that way, Collins Seminary, up through those areas. Just a lot of damage, guys. I mean, when a tornado comes through, it leaves it's a respecter of no person, and it leaves shambles behind it. Just broken dreams behind it. People's lives are destroyed, some forever, you know. Some can rebuild, but some never really recover from it. So we need to keep those people in our prayers. And the thing about it is I have told you guys on here that these things are coming. These types of events are going to get worse and worse as we move into solar cycle 25, as it reaches its peak. These type things are just going to be worse. You know, there's so much damage and destruction that's coming. Not only the weather, you know, we've got tornadoes that's going to be happening. We've got flooding, lightning. You know, the fires are hitting the panhandle of Texas, which we told you Texas was going to burn. There's 26 of them last I seen in the panhandle of Texas. They were all in the Carolinas up there, you know, and there's probably going to be more even up. We had Long Island, that there was some on Long Island out there. I told you New York was going to burn. You still got Florida to go. We're going to have a lot of them in Florida. There's going to be California has already had a lot out there. I've told you that California was going to have these issues. There's just Las Vegas will be one of them that's going to have some eventually. And guys, it's not going to be just any one particular area. It's going to be state after state after state. Before it's over with, it will probably be every state in the United States will eventually get into these fires and stuff like this because of what's happening and what is coming upon this nation. We have to remember, you know, we went to, I'm going to just go ahead and call it, we sent sorties out this past Friday night, and we bombed Yemen really hard, and there's lots of stuff going on over there that is going to be just devastation on top of devastation. I told you guys we're going to have to start watching Syria, Damascus there in Syria. We're going to have to start watching the Gaza Strip. We're going to start watching Saudi Arabia, Israel. Turkey's going to play a big part in a lot of this stuff. Italy is going to be another one of those big areas we're going to have to watch. Just Naples, those kind of places, Ethiopia. Guys, these places are key places right now. That is, we're going to start seeing major events taking place. Greenland will be another place that we're going to probably see in the news a lot of. Canada is going to be another one of them. It's going to be in the news a lot of. You know, Mexico, there's going to be a lot in the news about Mexico. You're going to see Australia. I mean, guys, there's so much stuff that has happened, especially once they got a new king in Great Britain. Lots of laws and rules in countries changed that people are just not familiar with. Lots of places came out from under the crown, and they're seeking their independence now. And it's just, we're living in some trying times, some very troublesome and trying times. Now, the thing that's disturbing to me right now is the simple fact, because we're in these times, I believe it's literally the last days of an age that the humans are going to go through. I don't think it's the end of the world. I don't think it's the end of time. I think it's the end of the age. And I'm talking about the end of the age, I'm talking about the church age that's spoken of in the book of Revelation. Now, I've spoken to different pastors in lots of different places and stuff, and I'm questioning pastors. And this is beginning to disturb me, because I get these conflicting answers. Are y'all preaching about the end times? Because that's where we are. We are in the end times. I get all kind of answers from all kinds of types of people from everywhere. Literally, some go, well, during the World War I and World War II, people thought it was the end of time. You know, the Lord was coming back. And I said, yeah, I get that. But people didn't realize the time clock could not start ticking until Israel become a nation again. You know? And once Israel become a nation again, that was part of the prophetic events that had to happen. Anything that happened prior to that, the Lord could not come back. Literally. Because if the Bible was accurate and His scriptures was true, everything has to follow into events. There's things that have to correspond. And I guess one thing that aggravates me with a lot of pastors today is they won't preach on the end times. Some have told me, well, it causes too much anxiety, and it causes just people they get depressed and anxious and all this, because they don't want to think about that. They want to think that their children are going to be able to grow up and live normal lives like they did, go to college, get educations, get careers. They're going to have grandchildren. And I'm like, but you can't not do it. It's not meant for the child of God. You know, I mean, it plainly teaches that the wrath of God is not for God's people. Even if we're here during the parts of the tribulation, if you're a child of the King, it's not for you. Now, are you possibly going to see times get rough? And the answer is yes. That's been throughout history. And people don't understand what's going on over there in the Congo and in these Islam nations over there and all that. Christians are being, especially in Syria right now, these going through everywhere. I mean, these things, guys, we're already living in that time. The problem is, here in the United States, we've had it so good for so long that we don't even have an inkling about what persecution really is. But trust me, you can trust me on this one. Simply because when the scripture tells me that the nation of Israel will be trodden underfoot 42 months, that means that somewhere, somehow, something has got to happen to the United States in order for that to happen, because Israel is one of our #1 allies. Literally our #1 allies. Much of our fuel goes to them. I mean, we have so much technology entwined within them. And lots of people sit back and go, yeah, well, I don't like the nation of Israel. I don't like this. It doesn't matter what you like. It don't matter what I like. The Word of God literally sits back and it gives us what we call the blessing that goes along. The Lord told way back yonder, those, when he spoke with Abraham, he said, those that bless you, I will bless them. Those that curse you, I will curse them. So it doesn't matter whether we like the nation of Israel or not. As long as we're blessing that nation, we will be blessed. If we step in and start cursing that nation, trying to divide that nation, doing anything like that, then the United States ourselves, we will be divided, we will be cursed, and we will suffer the devastation that the rest of the world's been suffering. We've been immune to it so far because we've protected God's people, the apple of his eye that he says in the scriptures. Now, do I agree with everything they do? No, I don't agree with everything they do. As a matter of fact, if you go to Israel, the actual leaders in Israel hate Christianity. But that's beside the fact. The fact is, they are God's people. And when we sit back and we don't do what we're supposed to do as a nation, and our pastors and our preachers and our evangelists and all these people out there, they will not do what they're supposed to do in preaching the word and preaching about the end times, preaching about the blessings, preaching about all the things that's in the book of Revelation, the book of Daniel, the book of Ezekiel, Hosea, Amos, Isaiah, and all that deals with it, Jeremiah, that deals with the end times. They are doing an injustice, literally, to God's people. What does God tell us? He said judgment. Where does he tell you judgment needs to begin? At the house of God. Why? Because the house of God is where the blessings of a nation come from. You know, we sit back and we talk about, and there is some element to truth to this, that we need to build our military. We need to build up. We need to be strong. And yes, we do. We need to be all these things. But you know where freedom comes from? Freedom comes from the living God, is where freedom comes from. And I use the word living God because there are many, 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 many gods out there that are being worshiped today. But there are only one true living God. And we have to get that in our heads. And I've had pastors look at me and tell me, Danny, there's no other gods out there. There's only one God. And I tell them, I said, there's one living God, but there's tons of other gods out there. If it's not so, then why did one of the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not have any other gods before me? You know, if there were not other gods out there. And when you watch all these, I don't watch TV, but I've had people tell me that lots of times there's things that happen on TV, these programs and stuff, and people will say, they'll hold up like an Emmy award. So I'm just using this is hypothetical. They'll hold up an award, or a country music award, whatever. And they'll say, and I praise God for having helped me get this. What God are they talking about? They didn't say the living God. They just said God. There's thousands of gods out there. And yet, we don't want to talk about the living God. We want to separate him from everything that we own. And that's one thing, I guess, today, that with pastors out here in our world today, they want to preach feel-good messages. And I get occasionally preaching a message that's an upbeat message that brings vitality back to the congregation. But you know, what did Christ say? Christ, when he came to this earth, he said, I came to seek and to save those which were lost. He had nothing to do with the rich and the wealthy and the money changers and all that kind of stuff. He didn't come for them. He came to seek and to save those which were lost. What did he tell them? He said, go out into the highways and the hedges and bring them in that my house might be full. If there's anything that aggravates me more than anything in this world, is people who think, and I have family members this way, and we we don't talk about this very often because they know I'm going to get fired up when I do. And that is, you got to go to church. You got to be dressed a specific way when you go to church. God don't give a flip what you got on your body. God don't care what you eat. He said food is for the stomach. He said take no thought about the food. He said take no thought about the clothing you're going to put on your back. All these types of things. When I went to church in Central Mississippi, I guess that's one of the things I appreciated about that little church where I went. Men wore overalls to church. And I'm going to tell you what. There ain't nothing in this world wrong with wearing overalls to church, because back in the day, in the older generations, everybody wore overalls to church. They wore them to work. They had their work overalls and they had their Sunday overalls. The ones that they wore on Sunday were the ones that they didn't get dirty all week. They kept them pristine and clean and they looked good. They had like a white shirt on, a nice good pair of overalls on. And when I hear people talk about literally that they, and I see this in church a lot, a lot of time. Not only overalls, I've seen, Wanda and I've had this discussion. Wanda was raised the old hard shell Faithway Baptist Church. And we talk about this on a regular basis, how that when she was going to church, women were forbidden to wear pants. You couldn't cut your hair. You know, you had to do this and you had to do that in order to go to the house of God. And literally, if you did, you were shunned and you were condemned. And you were this and you were that. If you wore makeup, you couldn't have this. And you couldn't do your nails. You know, you couldn't do this. You couldn't do that. And if your clothes were too flashy, I mean, there's all this kind of stuff, these stipulations, and it ain't nothing more than so a pastor can control the congregation of a group of people. You know, when I can walk out there and there's nothing wrong with a woman wearing a dress to church. Don't get me wrong. I think it's quite, if they're moderate, I think it's great. But I've seen women wear dresses to church before that were more revealing than a pair of pants would have ever been. You know, I've seen that. And then there's some people you see got the hair all bowled up on top of their head. What's the first thing that pops in your head? Oh, that's a Pentecostal group right there, you know. Or if you see them walking out and they're all prim and proper, got the hair on their head, and they're wearing long dresses all the way down to their feet, you know, and their hair is hanging way down to the belt in the back down here, where you go, oh, that's the old Faithway Baptist Church right there. Now, them women, you know, yeah. I mean, you can pick them out. You go to see a woman wearing a nice, pretty pantsuit to church and all that, you go, oh, she's Southern Baptist. I mean, you just nail this stuff, or she's Catholic right off the bat, you know what I mean? Or she's Protestant right off the bat. You see this in people. You see someone come walking by and they got the veil thing around their head. Oh, that's an Islam person right there. Now, they look at the Quran. You can pick out religions like snapping your finger, because every religion has some kind of stipulation on it about what you can do, what you can't do to go to church. I mean, I've told y'all this before. I was in a congregation of people one time, and this young lady, they found out she was a really good singer at one of the major colleges up there. And when the pastor asked her, said, "Ma'am, would you mind singing for us this morning?" And she said, "Well, I'm not really dressed for it," because she had a pair of blue jeans on and had a hole in the knee. And come to find out later, that's all she had, to be honest with you. She was very poor, but she had a beautiful voice. And he asked her to get up and sing. And when she did, an elderly pastor that had retired and couldn't stand up behind the pulpit anymore, him and his wife and some people got up and walked out of the congregation, because they said, "I can't believe that pastor let a woman in that kind of attire get behind that pulpit and sing like that. That's a disgrace to God." God don't care about that. He said to take your voice and make a joyful noise unto the Lord. That's what the Lord said to do. The Lord didn't say nothing about what you had to have on when you went up there. He said just be modest. That's his only stipulations for going into his congregation. Be modest. You know, don't go in there with a pair of shorts on, a mini skirt, something like that. As long as you got decent clothing on and you're not revealing all your body, then hey, God don't really care about the rest of it. You know what I mean? We got to get this stuff out of our head that we're falling behind and we're not really reaching people, because we're not reaching out to certain individuals simply because all we're doing is literally trying to put a finger on someone, trying to keep them in a congregation, trying to make them do what we want them to do as pastors, because we don't want to lose our congregation. Because if we lose our congregation, then we lose financial support, and we can't. And I talked to a guy about this the other day, just this past week. I was talking to a gentleman about this. He told me, he says, all I've heard from churches today now is how many trips we're going to take to this country, or how we're going to go to that country to witness to people, and they won't even go down the street to witness to their own neighbor, but yet they think they got to go to another country to witness to somebody in another country. He said all it is taking glorified vacations to go to these other countries, or they're going over there to help somebody build a church, and they won't even help the neighbor down the road build their church because they don't believe like I believe. You know what? What does the scripture say about that? The scriptures, what did Christ tell his disciples? He said, if they're not against us, they're for us. In other words, leave them alone. Let them go. You won't ever see me standing up and badgering someone because they eat a particular food, because they wear a particular kind of clothes, because they worship on a particular day, because I think all of that is hogwash. My scriptures, if you go over, where is it? And if you go over to Romans, or I think it's in Romans right there, or Ephesians, where the Lord speaks about some people eat some things, some people eat other things, some people wear this, some people wear that, some people worship on this day, some people worship on that day, but they all do it to glorify God. Okay? What did Jesus say? What is it over in Hebrews? It's over in Hebrews, I believe it was. Jesus said, I am the Sabbath. Jesus became the Sabbath. And when he became the Sabbath, he became the new high priest. And once he became the new high priest, you get a whole new set of rules. He added another commandment in there, for us. Not just the 10 we got, but he added that other one in there. To love everybody as I have loved you. If you can do that, you've kept all 10 of the other ones. Don't that make sense to you? Now stop and think about this, guys. We're living in a country today, and believe it or not, you're fixing to see all hell break loose in the United States. We're not going to get away from this just because we live in a country that's got oceans all the way around us to help protect us from all the other things of this world. Trust me, there's already things embedded in this country that you're not going to get away from. It's not going to happen. You're going to see devastation. The thing that gets me is people sit back and they're so used to taking vacations. They're so used to, and I don't have anything against taking a vacation. I've took a lot of them in my life till I got smart enough, wise enough to understand why it's not really that important. I mean, I don't see anything wrong with it. If you can do it, hey, I think it's great. But there are people out there. I have people sit back, and I'm going to tell you, this is honest to God truth. I have people sit back here and tell me, well, I wished I could afford a high tunnel like you've got. And I look at them, I go, well, why can't you? Well, how much did yours cost? I said, well, it's a 12 by 60 something. I said, I think I paid right at $4,000 for it, all of it together. $4,000 for a high tunnel? I'm like, yeah. And they go, there's no way I can afford that. I go, well, didn't you just go to Disney World this past year? Well, yeah. I said, how much did that trip cost you? What do you mean? I said, what did it cost you? Time you bought fuel to go down there. You had to take off from work to go down there, loss of income. I said, then you got your place to stay. You got your food to eat every day down there. And then you got to pay for tickets to go in. I said, what did it cost you for all that? If you want to do a raw, well, it's probably about $4,000, but it was a family time. I said, okay. It's priority. See, I don't do that kind of stuff. I'd rather have the high tunnel. That high tunnel is going to last me till something happens to it. That you go down there and do that, that's a one-time event. And I'm not knocking going to Disney World, guys. I'm just using it as an example. I've never been to Disney World. I don't care about Disney World. I think they're corrupt. I think they're wicked. I think they're vile. But because I know the background and I know all the history that goes along with it, that's the only reason I can say that. It would be anywhere is what I'm talking about. It can go anywhere. But that's just my example right now. But the thing about it is, it's all about priorities. It's where you want to spend your money at. And people get on to me all the time, well, we can't afford to do what you do. Yes, anybody can afford. Look, I live on Social Security. Anybody can afford to do what anybody else does. It's all a matter, and look, I used to be in that boat years ago, okay? This is going to be a little story I'm going to tell you right here. I was standing in my church one day, and I ran a construction. I owned construction companies, and I was driving two-wheel drive trucks, plain Jane two-wheel drive trucks, and for my crews. And I was sitting there talking to a gentleman one day, and I told him, I said, man, he owned a company. He had these nice big four-wheel drive trucks and all this kind of stuff that he gets in and out of the job sites with, and didn't have to worry about mud and stuff like that. Could carry big loads and stuff. And I told him, I said, yeah, I said, I wished I made enough money on mine that I could afford to do that kind of stuff, And he told me, he said, well, I don't know why you can't afford to do it on your job. I said, well, I don't make that kind of money, I make decent money, but these truck notes are just like ungodly high, for these trucks and everything. And he told me, he said, well, look, he said, I still don't understand why you can't do it. He said, because they're not that much more expensive than what you're already paying. And an elderly gentleman standing behind me that was a very, very, very wealthy man who owned a huge road construction crew company, he walked up there and he said, Danny, he said, why can't you afford one of them trucks? And I told him, I said, well, man, I said, the notes on them things is like $600-800 a month or more. And he said, you should be able to afford that if you were on construction companies. I said, well, I could, but I said, do you know what kind of strain that puts on me? He said, look, let me tell you something. I'll tell you what I'll do. He said, I want you to go buy one to use on your construction crew. He said, and if you can't pay for it, he said, I will literally buy it back from you. I will buy it back from you. If God will not give you the money to pay for it, then I'll give you the money back. And I told him, I said, now, is this for real? And he said, yeah. He said, I promise you, you can afford that truck. If you just got to trust God and put your priorities in the right place. So I went and I bought one. I bought a quad cab four-wheel drive truck and kept it for a year. Made the payments with no problem at all. Matter of fact, I went and bought a second one. And I realized after I bought the second one, kind of had one of those panic modes. I really didn't need the second one. But I was sitting back going, Lord, you blessed me with the first one. And I want to just go ahead and I bought another one that was really fancy chrome edition one. And I sit back and I thought about it and I said, you know what? These two trucks, I just paid enough money for these two trucks. I could have bought 50 acres of property for what I paid for these two trucks. And I just immediately put one of them up for sale and sold it. And you know what? It's been 2006 that I did that. I'm still driving that truck today. That four-wheel drive quad cab truck, I'm still driving it today. I made every payment on it, paid it off ahead of time. And you know what? The gentleman was exactly right. It's about priorities. It's about what you will allow yourself to do. It's not about what you can't do. I had another gentleman from California who I was struggling about building a cabin. I was struggling about building ponds. I was struggling about fencing my property and all. And this gentleman, a very godly man, said, why can't you? And I said, because I don't have the money. He said, why not? I told him, I said, I just don't, He said, you're thinking too small, son. He said, God owns it all. Ask God for it. If he wants you to have it, he'll give it to you. And I bless the Lord above. I sat down and started praying about it. I said, Lord, I could really use these things. I'm not trying to be rich. I'm not trying to be anything that I'm not. I said, but I really need some of these. I need fencing for my cows. I need more land. And you know what? God gave me everything I asked for, and he allowed me to pay for it. Guys, that's what I'm talking about today. We have preachers standing in pulpits that's preaching feel-good messages. They're not preaching end-time events. They're not preaching for us to get ready for what's coming our way. They're not telling us to be wise with our finances. They're not telling us to do all these things that we need to do in these end times. But yet they want to stand up and they just want to preach a feel-good message. They want to tickle our ears like the Scripture says. People in the congregation are looking for people they'll tickle their ears, And And that's where we're at today. We are in a feel-good society, a microwave society that wants instantaneous gratification. We're sitting in a situation in a group of people today, in a country today, that's a feel-good generation. They want preachers to preach a feel-good message. They don't want to they don't want to come away from church feeling like they've had their toes stepped on. They want to come away from there feeling good and all energetic. And you got some pastor standing behind the pulpit. I've witnessed this happen. Standing up there with a big old fine suit on and everything like this, and thinking that you got to be dressed a specific way to go to church. No, you don't. God don't care what you got on. God don't look on the outward parts of man according to the scriptures. He looks on what's on the inside of a man. What's in your heart, what's in your mind. That's what he's looking at. He could care less about the outward part of you, because he is interested in what your soul feels. And today, friend, please, make sure your soul is right with the Lord. Make sure your faith is where it is. People say, well, I don't know about all this faith stuff. Well, let me tell you something. You cannot love, worship, or serve God without faith. It's just not going to happen. Okay? The Bible says to be friends with the world is to be enemies with God. It also tells us to come out from among her, the system. Come out of the system that the world's got set up for you to live in, where the husband's got to be busting his butt on a 40-hour or 60-hour week. The wife's got to be busting her butt on a 40 or 60-hour week. God said, get out of that system, because you're a servant to the world, and I can't have you if you're a servant to the world. Literally, get out of it. Go read Psalm 128 like I told y'all last week. Learn what the Lord has to say about a man who raises his own food. We're fixing to go into some bad times, okay? I'm just bringing you this today because I know what's coming ahead of us, and I want you to be prepared. I don't want you to be left out in the cold. I don't want you to be starving. I don't want you to be doing without. I want you to prioritize yourself, and I want you to put what needs to be first, which is God himself comes first. Make sure you get that taken care of before you get anything else in this world took care of. Make sure your eternal destination is where it needs to be at, so that whatever happens to you, you will be taken care of. That is my prayer for you today, guys. Thank you so much for sitting here listening to me, and thank you for being a part of Porch Time. Thank you for being a part of Deep South Homestead at Pecan Grove. Thank you for being a part of all of our YouTube channels. And thank you most of all for just sitting down and listening to words like this from the Lord, and being a part of a group of people that one day is going to inherit the whole world. Thank you guys from Deep South Homestead.